Hey, Tommy, can you hear me?
Hey, I can. How are you?
I'm doing well. How are you doing?
Doing good. Does my audio sound okay?
Yeah, you sound good. Look, everything's great.
Awesome. Awesome. Cool. I just moved my office in the basement, so I need some more color down here. So
I like the poster. I added a plant in my background for my presentation, so you do what you need to do.
exactly. I just need to put stuff on the walls at some point. So maybe a plant or two here would be good too. So
That is exciting though to move office spaces. I mean, after 7, 8 months of this, it's probably a good idea to change up your scenery a bit.
part of it we started finishing our basement before the pandemic, and then we stopped because we don't want people in our house. But the more we got through it, we're like, yeah, I was right off the kitchen. I have four kids, and it was just too loud. And I was like, I need to go sound insulate the basement and do the basement. So I'm very happy with that choice. So,
Good. Well, that's exciting. I'm excited for your talk today too. Do you have any questions about the system, or do you feel pretty good when we get started here?
honestly, I think I'm good. I was a little nervous because I had some problems when I tested it last week. The reason why I got on so early is just to test it. So my presentation showed up good, and so I think I'm ready to rock and roll.
Okay, perfect. I will jump off the screen then to give you all the attention.
Cool.
But just so you know, I will be here monitoring in the background the whole time. So
Awesome.
if you need me, just shoot me a message or wave around frantically,
Cool.
and I can step in to help.
Cool. Awesome. How I've been kind of in and out most of the day. How have the other talks been? Has there been a pretty good audience for most of them?
Yeah, it's been really good so far. I work in a couple different areas of the event, so
Yep.
I've only been able to attend two breakout sessions, and one of them I was moderating.
Nice. Okay.
So I think attendance fluctuates a little bit, probably averaging anywhere from 30 to 70,
Nice.
but
That's great.
consistency stays really good. It seems like once the audience is in there, they're pretty locked in
Awesome.
for the
Cool.
talk.
Cool. That's great.
Yeah. So it should be really good. And then you are aware too that there will be a recording after
Yep.
as well.
Totally. I'll do my best not to say anything too incriminating that I'm recording.
Just yeah, keep us both out of trouble and we'll be good to go.
Cool. Awesome.
Awesome. All right. Well, I will see you and then wrap up just around 4 o'clock too. If you go over by a minute or two, no one's gonna hold it against you. So
Honestly, I'll probably go short if anything and make time for some questions, just because it is kind of a meaty. Like we could go 100 different ways, so kind of want to set the groundwork and then leave 10 minutes or so for some questions. So we should be good.
okay. Perfect. All right. Well, I will be here, but I'll give you back the screen.
Cool. Thank you.
Yeah.
Everybody's joining. Just want to say hi. I'm going to need some hype in the chat. I'll have that going as we're coming in here. We'll start in a few minutes just to get everybody get a chance to jump in. But feel free to start jumping in chat. All right, we'll get started in one more minute here. All right, just to check, can everybody see my presentation and hear me okay? Just drop a thumbs up or yes in chat. Awesome, thank you all. All right, we're right at 2 minutes past starting time, so we're gonna dive on in. Good afternoon, everybody. Thank you for spending your late Friday with me. Today, I'm hopefully going to take you on starting a journey towards site reliability engineering. But first, I'm going to talk about where most companies start, even before my introduction here. So specifically, I'm going to focus on kind of where startups kind of evolve from. And this is, kind of how they operate. Something breaks, an engineer is often just sitting in the corner fixing that broken thing with very little communication out to the rest of the company, and it gets fixed and everybody moves on and they're happy. As the team evolves into a larger team, you have a few OG or experienced engineers handling the complicated problems, and the juniors just aren't learning enough. And sometimes there's an excuse of it's really hard to pass off work to other engineers due to the complexity and technical debt that we've taken on in the early days. Now you're in a spiral where most of your senior engineers are focused on incidents, bugs, probably being woken up in the middle of the night and not adding any value to your products. You run into a world where everybody's frustrated and you have the inability for engineers to actually fix the root cause of what keeps breaking because you're on to the next ticket. So if that resonates with anybody, we're gonna talk more about site reliability engineering. My introduction, I'm Tommy Vacek. I am Vice President of Engineering at WP Engine. A lot of you may be asking, what's WP Engine? I'm not familiar with that company in town. So I actually started my first 2 years at Flywheel, where I was over all of software infrastructure, agile operations, and SRE. We just were acquired by WP Engine last year, and so we've just been about a year over into the acquisition. Right now, in my role, I'm over the Flywheel product line, which focuses on freelancers and growing agencies. And I'm also over our shared services group, which is a lot of our business systems. So thinking about identity, authorization, billing systems, UI framework, and also our service mesh. So those are kind of my current areas of responsibilities. So now that you've felt the pain a little bit with that intro story about how some companies evolve, I'm going to be taking you through a journey of some of the basic concepts of SRE, some of the comparisons of SRE versus DevOps, how to pitch SRE properly at your organization, which I think is super important and sometimes overlooked on how strategic you need to be there. And then also I'm going to touch on some practicals on how you actually get started if you haven't started the journey yet. So I'm going to start with a little bit of a definition, and this is according to Google. The long definition is our mission is to protect, provide for, and progress the software and systems behind all of Google's public services, Google Search, Ads, Gmail, Android, YouTube, App Engine, to just name a few, with an ever watchful eye on their availability, latency, performance, and capacity. I like the shortened definition a little bit better because it's very simple and to the point. What you get when you treat operations as if it's a software problem. I think that can resonate and make sense to a lot of people. So let's jump in and talk a little bit about the differences between SRE and DevOps. You've probably heard a lot of comparisons. It gets very confusing very fast. There's a lot of overlap in certain situations. What I believe at the end of the day is I actually believe they're both important and they both have their need within a company that's especially scaling and growing. So let's break them down a little bit. So I'm going to run through kind of the top level concepts of each. SRE is more focused on operations, incident response, postmortems, monitoring events, alerting, and also capacity planning, while DevOps is more focused on delivery, release automation, environment builds, config management, infrastructure as code. Still not completely clear. So the way I like to break it down is just two primary responsibilities of each group. SRE, I think their main priority at the end of the day is focused on reliability. DevOps, at the end of the day, their main priority is delivery speed. That said, the reason why I'm talking about SRE today is I think that if you have a reliable system, you can actually have a major impact on delivery speed. If there's confidence in your reliability and capacity, your engineers are going to be more willing to deploy, and you're going to push changes to production much, much faster than if you had an unreliable on a system that was struggling with capacity. So definitely an indirect correlation to delivery speed with a strong SRE focus. So typical journey, especially if you look at the Omaha market, most companies follow a similar pattern. They look to other companies around them and decide to build kind of in the same structures. And unfortunately, a lot of times those become very matrix structures and unfortunately lead to silos. As companies scale, they become even more matrixed. Communication will break down. Because of this, DevOps and SRE both become an important focus. They bridge a lot of those gaps that you wouldn't have normally bridged otherwise, because you also need delivery speed and reliability even in a large organization. So kind of thinking about how this handoff process typically happens at a company. You have a software engineer. They're usually under a lot of stress with critical timelines. I would imagine a bunch of you are probably working under deadlines right now. You probably pressured to deliver fast because some customer paid for something that they want to see in production right away. So you'll be tempted to skip over testing procedures. You may provide no test coverage at all. You maybe hand off basic implementation procedures to your operation team. And then you're just off on the next ticket and not even thinking about that code generally for a while. On the other side, you have an operations team who maybe it just feels stuff just got thrown over the wall at them. They, again, they're working under critical timelines. They have lots of changes bundled together. The test environments they're testing code in probably lack some, production parity, so it's not a one-for-one, match when they're doing their testing. And they're getting interrupted by incident calls, often lasting most of the day and having to context switch quite a bit, and probably living on very little sleep because they were woken up the night before due to some escalation. Oh, can you guys hear me? Oh, okay, cool. Okay, so I'll chat that maybe you guys lost me. Sorry. And then they finally implement the changes. Well, operation.
All right. For everyone who's still with us, I'm going to try to troubleshoot with Tommy and see if we can get him back online. So please hang tight and hopefully we'll have this sorted.
Maria, they can hear me, I think.
Maria?
Cool. I'm going to keep going. Thanks for covering me in chat, y'all. Appreciate it. All right. So we were just at the phase of operations, putting stuff into production. Well, in reality, what this typically translates to is you're probably going to have some failed implementations. Customers are mad because they're paying for stuff that actually is breaking their systems. You have an operations team that's burnt out and you're causing division amongst teams. They start calling devs in the middle of the night and waking them up, and nobody's sleeping. And then you start to implement more and more process. Maybe you have change review boards 90 minutes a day for 3 days a week. They bring zero value and eliminating actually incidents. And then you stack up changes over and over again. Okay, that might be a little too specific and might have actually happened in a previous role. But then worse, you start losing your best people. Does that sound too familiar? To me, it does, because that used to be my past life. So starting with a book, and again, this is DevOps, not SRE, but who's read the Phoenix Project? Watching chat here, has anybody read it? A few people, awesome. So what I really appreciate about this book is the story. The story is painful. I actually read it while I was in New York City as I was transitioning from my previous job to my role at Flywheel. My wife and I started at an Amazon bookstore, which is the first time I've ever been in an Amazon bookstore, where I bought this book. We started our walk in Central Park and hit every single park on our way down to Manhattan. I read this entire book. I couldn't put it down. It brought me pain, but it helped me understand how to bring teams together through and deliver with much more speed. But after I put the book down, there was still something that was missing to me, and that was a strong focus on reliability. And that's where SRE comes in. Again, it goes back to the short definition of what you get when you treat operations as if it's a software problem. So kind of you get to the point of you start to understand why reliability matters, but you've got to translate that into the business. Maybe a few of you have tried pitching SRE to your business, but it failed for whatever reason. Did you pitch building an SRE discipline by using words like Toil and air budget or SLI? Those things absolutely matter, but that's not going to what gets the business to understand the true value in SRE. By pitching those ideas, I wanted to translate that into how that could sound in a real life example. So imagine you're finishing your basement, which I just went through myself, and you need to hire an electrician. Your first electrician comes in and says, hey, you need 4 triple gain boxes, 2 20 amp circuits, 200 feet of 12 gauge Romex. Chances are you're probably not going to go with that electrician. But if you have an electrician that comes in and says, hey, I see how you could use this space for your family gatherings. We could set up some perfect lighting for you to be able to watch the game or a movie. You can control it with your iPad or some other device. We'll put in a mini kitchen so you can serve snacks and drinks and just kind of make your dreams come true with this space. You're more than likely going to go with that electrician because you understand what that electrician is going to deliver at the end of the day. So when I think about pitching anything, not just SRE, I take it in a 3-phased approach. First, you have to start with the relationship. You can't just pitch anything if you don't have trust in the person that you're pitching to. And so what I would advise is stop here. If whoever you're taking this pitch to, if you don't have that relationship established, you probably want to make some investments into that relationship before you start pitching an idea where you're going to probably be asking for some funding. Once you get that relationship established and there's some trust built between you and whoever your business counterpart is, you need to assess what's important, but what's important to them. Because remember, you're already bought in, you know the value, you've read the books, but your business partner doesn't. So your business counterpart needs to understand what is the importance of an air budget and what is it going to do for my business. A good example would be, hey, if we implement more reliability into our systems, your churn numbers are going to go down, which ultimately means that we are a healthier business and we're retaining more customers and more money and more revenue. They need to understand why it matters over and over and over again. So then you need to gain buy-in. You can't throw everything at your decision makers at once. So if you pick up the SRE book and say, we've got to do this and we've got to do this yesterday, you're probably going to lose them right away. So just as anything agile, you need to learn, you need to show them value over time, probably by experimentation, starting small and showing some incremental value. And over time, you'll gain more and more buy-in, and you'll go through this 1 through 3 loop over and over again, and you'll be able to expand the SRE practices as you go. So you've got some buy-in. Let's talk about your first hire a little bit. Your first hire is important. It'll actually help set your path for success or failure. SRE is becoming a much more popular skill set, but not necessarily always in the Midwest. It's still fairly new. There are some companies adopting it, but it's not a widespread mindset or skill that we have in the market right now. So you're going to have to be a bit creative and intentional about what you're looking for in your first hire. So you need somebody who's flexible, that has an operations focus, that understands software engineering, that understands monitoring systems, automation, system architecture. I would strongly encourage you to make to look at somebody first internally inside your org before looking outside. The reason for that is because they have context a lot of how your organization operates today, and they can bring that forward. But you're going to have to provide that person quite a bit of training so they can fill in all the gaps of areas that they may not have complete understanding in, and that's going to definitely be a lot of training. Common place to look for somebody to first start your SRE practice is within a product development team or your operations team. Just looking at chat here. So good question, Tim. I'll actually cover that here in a second. So we actually started in our operations team. So we didn't have an SRE practice at all at Flywheel. The team was essentially so we had an operations team that was essentially an extension of our support team. Didn't have access into databases, didn't have access into anything meaty that they could actually go fix anything other than just some low levels, customer issues. We took that team. First thing we did is we made them read the SRE book by Google, and I'll put a link to that here later. And then there's tons of training out there that you can go after. There's much more training out there now than when we first took on the approach of SRE. But we at Flywheel, we made the decision to evolve our operations team and convert them into an SRE team over time. We do use Google Cloud for most of our infrastructure hosting. So we actually had an existing relationship with Google, and they were able to walk beside us, and they actually had their customer reliability engineering team come into Omaha a few years back and train our teams. And that really kickstarted our culture, which was really great. It really infused the mindset. And they even took us through practices of defining SLOs and SLIs and hearing from how people on the front lines of Google of how they operate in an SRE mindset. So training is definitely key, especially if you grow your team organically and you don't have the talent that you can just pull from in the market already. One area that people at most technology companies get wrong is on call. So there are very few technology businesses that don't operate 24/7. If you're in one of those, count yourself lucky. There's not many companies that don't operate 24/7. So that generally means that there's some level of somebody being on call. At Google, the expectation is that SRE teams are on call. I would imagine most of you on here have been on call at some point in your lives. And some of us have had terrible experiences and situations of being on call. We could probably all tell war stories for a long time on some of those, but it can be one of those things that causes you to leave your job. For me, it was, as I raised a young family, being on call every night and weekends was just not something that I wanted, not a lifestyle that I wanted to live for the rest of my life, which caused me to look at other places. So I think we should be thinking more about how do we do it well, because your SRE team will be on call. So some common issues that you could run into are your team's not spread over multiple time zones. You may have missing skill sets amongst that team. You have an engineer that receives an excessive amount of pages every day, even if they're valid pages or not valid pages, just the toil that takes on your mind. And then you create high turnover in the team. This can even happen on an SRE team. It's hard to recover from, and you need to do better than that. So here are some ways to do better. So overcoming some of the issues of a common on-call team, you need to balance out your on-call work with project work. I've always been a big believer in being on call 100% of the time is not good for anybody. You need to mix up what you're doing on a daily basis and maybe jump into some project work. One of the ways that we did this at Flywheel, we created a large enough SRE team initially where we could have a good rotation of on call. And then while folks weren't on call, they were actually focused on improving some of the back end systems that would often break that would cause people to get called. So a good example is we have a backup system where we back up every single one of our WordPress sites every single day. As we scaled, that worked really well in the early days, but as you scale out, to many more thousand sites that you're backing up on a nightly basis, you start to run into a problem where you maybe can't back up every single site within a 24-hour cycle because of some inefficiencies that you built into the system initially. So our SRE team actually, within their project work, actually took it upon themselves and rewrote our entire backup system and cut down, how long it took to back up all of our sites from about 24 hours to about 4 hours. So, and that eliminated so many calls that team would receive every day. So definitely mixing up project and on-call work is important. Google actually limits the number of incidents that each person can take a month. They actually limit, most teams limit to 2. And they think if you're having more than 2 incidents in a month, you're probably moving too fast and you need to spend some time to go fix some stuff so you're not receiving so many calls. You also want to provide whoever is on call on your SRE team some support and escalation paths. So when shit hits the fan, give them someone to call. That's super important because they don't want to feel like they're off on their own and have nowhere to turn if stuff's broken. Many teams that are on call get compensated, and usually it's just built into their salary, or they get an extra amount of money every month. I've seen a better approach to kind of drive better incentives is to actually compensate based on the number of times that a SRE is called. But you need to cap it because there needs to be a balance within people's lives, and you don't want them turning into heroes that are on calls all the time just for the compensation. But you should be providing your team some level of compensation for being on call. New hires. So once you bring on some new hires, you need to give them training on procedures, debugging, understanding alerting, run books, and you need to make space for that. You can't just throw your new hires in the deep end. And your existing team, you actually have to run your existing team through actual scenarios that they might see in real life. It's better to be under stress and to see what could potentially happen in real life and in a safe environment, and creating some mock disasters kind of helps facilitate that and makes your team stronger. And I also think once you get into those situations, your level of stress, since you've been through something like that, can usually decrease quite a bit because you're familiar with what you're doing. Everything is a little bit more comfortable to you, so your stress levels will naturally go down as well. And then you need to give your team some grace and flexibility within their schedule. When your team is woken up and called all hours of the night, they have lives too. When you can give them some time off to spend with their family or their loved ones, after they've had a hard week, that earns you a ton of loyalty as a leader, and that should be a common thing that you do for your on-call team. And then finally, pushing more repeatable tasks to your frontline operations and support team and away from your SRE team. But better yet, solve those tasks with software if you can. So we've solved this at Flywheel by hiring 3 different regions. Well, we're kind of in 4. We have folks in the US, Australia, and Europe. We have 1 person in India. And that provides us with really good 24/5 support. And we do have some on call on the weekends. The burnout factor is literally next to nothing. We haven't had to worry about burnout. Actually, we take employee engagement surveys twice a year, and our SRE team is all the time at the top of the most engaged team, and the team that's not citing burnout as being a factor, which I think is a huge success marker for an on-call team. That team also has huge success. They prevent over 99% of all escalations and alerts from being escalated to engineering. So now you're creating some space for your engineers to actually build new products and then unravel some of that tech debt and make progress while not being on the front lines and being called all the time. I think that's not too bad as far as a success marker. Obviously we're always evolving, looking to get better, but we're definitely on a good path at this point. Let's talk about the engagement model a little bit. So now that you have your first hire, you've kind of got some on-call stuff figured out. This person has to know how to work with their counterparts and with other people within the business. So I actually picked this image. up late last night, and I thought shaking hands was a thing of, was kind of a joke because it's kind of a thing of the past right now in a pandemic. But having relationships and figuring out how to develop those relationships, even when we're not always face to face, is really, really important. An SRE team needs to engage with developers and product folks for the services that they're working on. This might sound really obvious, but it starts the process of having a shared understanding and setting expectations between each group. And that a relationship allows for empathy and for priorities to be addressed as the landscape of the business changes. The SRE team lives in reliability, and they can provide the development team with a new perspective on risks. SREs and developers all should care about the same things. They should all care about availability, reliability, performance, scalability, efficiency, and also pushing new feature releases. But they might have different incentives and care about those things in a different order. SREs are focused on long-term availability and reliability, while developers are more focused on new feature velocity. SRE should say, let's move fast as long as we're safe. This is where SLOs and air budgets are really important. With these, those are the things that actually set the expectations between groups. And if we start to become unsafe, then we need to slow down, set those ground rules early. You also need to set clear roadmaps. You need to have a shared vision, and you need to understand why we're making the decisions we're making. That often is understanding who your hero customer is, who are you actually building these products for, and what does that customer care about. Sustaining the relationships is not just a one-time thing that you do at some project kickoff, but you need to get together often. You need to invest time in communicating together and keeping that communication open. Even meet in person. I know we can't do that right now, but when we can again, even if teams are regionally distributed, you need to get in person. It's easier to see others as real human beings when you can meet them in person. And then reassess the ground rules over time. So those SLOs and those air budgets, you need to reassess those over time. And you also need to be positive when mistakes happen. Mistakes are absolutely going to happen. And so just assume positive intent in others and treat it as an opportunity to improve and learn. And here's where I have a little story of my firsthand experience of this. At a previous company, I worked for a payment processor, so we processed credit cards for retailers. And one of our customers was Domino's Pizza. We had just gone through a big project of migrating their online transaction database from an Oracle database to a SQL Server database. And I was pretty early in my career. And one night, it was about 5 o'clock on a Friday, I was working with somebody from Domino's and helping them troubleshoot some transactions and try to understand kind of what happened with some different transactions. Running some queries on the online database, which is something that I've always done. Well, I didn't know, at least the way that we had the databases configured in Oracle, you didn't have to put an explicit no lock in your query. Well, and how we had SQL Server set up at the time, you actually had to put an explicit no lock. So I ran a query against the main transaction table for Domino's, 5 o'clock, right in the middle of a dinner rush on a Friday, and locked the tables for about 5 or 10 minutes. I didn't know what I did at the time, but I could see people around me starting to wrestle, and I could see people jumping on calls. So I jumped on the call and started to figure out what was going on. And then over my cube wall, I had my DBA stand up, and he whispered, he said, "The query that you ran just locked the database." And then he brought his finger up to his mouth like he was shushing, like he was going to sweep it under the rug and pretend that it didn't happen. Well, I thought about it for a second and said, if we do that, nobody's going to learn, and we're going to sit on this call for the next 2 hours and try to figure out what the root cause is. And just generally, it's not a great thing for integrity. So I called my vice president, told them exactly what happened, and we took the opportunity on the call for the team to learn, so we wouldn't make that mistake again as we were migrating more databases over. That we probably self-inflict that again. And we also grew closer as a team because we knew we had each other's backs. So engagement model is important. Here's where I'm going to talk a little bit more about the meat of SLOs, but I want to define first what an SLI is and how they work together. So an SLI is a service level indicator. So the definition for it is it's a carefully defined quantitative measure of some aspect of the level of a service that you're providing. So think about it. Some examples of those would be request latency, or like a general error rate. So If you have, success versus error rates, there's an SLI could be an error rate. Now an SLO is a service level objective, and that is a target value or a range of values for a service level that is measured by an SLI. So kind of like putting that into English a little bit, think of an example where at Flywheel, we have all of our access logs for every single WordPress site going. We have all of the requests going through Fastly CDN. If you haven't worked with Fastly, I would highly recommend you to work through Fastly. So we capture every single request through Fastly as like a running access log, and we push all of that into BigQuery. And we can actually track the status codes and query on different things. And we know that customers have some natural error rate that is acceptable. So, some of our customers don't set their site up properly, so there's some natural error rate that always exists. So our error rate is typically we want 97% of all of our HTTP status codes to be successful. And if we fall below that, we know that there's typically an issue or something that we have to jump onto, or we have some underlying reliability problem with the system that we have to stop building new features on and go address and go fix before it gets worse. So using SLOs, I kind of think about this in two ways. I think about this as internal drivers and also external drivers, and why you use SLOs. So think of an internal driver as Toil, I think, is probably the best example that I could think of. So you can actually use an SLO to reduce toil. The cost to run a business should be as minimal as possible, especially if you're a SaaS company. You oftentimes are trying to out-innovate your competitors, which means you need to deviate all your money and your resources to growing the business instead of running the business. So over time, toil can add up, and it can actually be an enemy to the success of your business over time. So using an SLO, a service level objective, to kind of manage how much toil you're doing helps you be more successful in spending more money on innovating the business rather than just running the business. So error budgets, I kind of talked about it a little bit, but I didn't explicitly define what it is. So an error budget basically means when you've exceeded your SLO and you've gone past the point of reliability, you need to stop, and you need to focus on why it is that you went past that SLO, that limit of that SLO, and why do you have an error budget? Because we define reliability as trust. It's trust to your customers. It's trust to your employees that things are going to be reliable. We often say, running people's websites and hosting their websites, that we're in a lot of times, especially now more than ever in a pandemic when things are going digital, we are hosting a lot of people's livelihood and their ability to make money. So we host a lot of e-commerce sites, and if your e-commerce site is down during a very critical sale or down during a really critical time for you as a business owner, we're taking away your ability to actually run your business, and that's not a good place. And so we believe reliability is trust. We should almost be like the utility company where we're just always on and always working. So that's using that externally is super important. Our platform team has 5 pillars that they focus on. They focus on availability, performance, security, cost, and features. Reliability is, in the way that we view reliability, is both like availability and performance together. And we've all agreed that availability of all those different pillars is the most important aspect of our platform. And one of the examples of something that we measure on our platform is we continually measure our backend performance on anything hitting a backend database or file system. And we've actually stopped on feature build to address slipping performance issues. We don't have a strict error budget in place. It's been more of a conversation because of how close teams are, but we've absolutely slowed down or shifted priorities due to us exceeding an SLO. SLOs should affect internal and external factors. These should inform the business and act as a contract between teams to ensure that we're prioritizing the right thing. I like having SLOs in place ahead of time before something goes bad, because it really sets the shared expectation between the business and the technical side of the business. So SLOs are very important. I'm going to kind of summarize here. Good to see you too, Michael. So kind of walk through a lot of different things, understanding the basics. I'm purposely leaving a little bit of time here at the end because I'd love to go deeper on anything that you'd all like to know about. understanding the basics. We walk through bypassing the typical journey so you can avoid common pitfalls that most companies fall into. Effectively make a pitch of why SRE is important to the business, and then also how to make a great first hire or a great first set of hires, doing on call right, or at least a lot better, and then establishing an engagement model, and then using SLOs as a tool for success. Before I get into questions, I have to do the obligatory, we're hiring. We write a lot of Ruby at Flywheel. I know there's not a lot of Ruby folks in Omaha, but if you're interested in learning more, we put on a session last year called Ruby on Ails. We can't necessarily do the Ails as well this year, but Andy Neely, who's in the picture, actually took us through a couple of night workshop to kind of ramp people onto Ruby. So if you're interested in learning more, there's my email, there's my LinkedIn, or you can go to wpengine.careers. We've also got a beautiful building that's sitting downtown empty right now, just north of the ballpark. Those are actual pictures except for the one in the middle. Those aren't renderings. That's really how beautiful the office space is. It's one of the most beautiful office spaces in Omaha. And again, it's currently sitting empty. Once it's safer, if you ever want a tour, hit me up and I'd love to take you around the office. Let me stop there and see if there's any questions I can answer. I'm going to stop sharing my screen. Cool. Yeah. Awesome, Tim. I absolutely will. One great thing about the kind of some of Google's materials, they make actually their SRE book free online. So if you just Google Google's Site Reliability Engineering book, they actually have it online for free. Actually on my desk too, I've got their workbook. Went out to San Francisco a couple of years ago for one of Google's conferences, and they had their SRE team, kind of handing out these workbooks that I had actually written these workbooks. So I would definitely go check out their online book for one, and also pick up the Site Reliability workbook for a second one to kind of give you a start. So Jim asks, can you describe any challenges you have with working with both onshore and offshore portions of your team? That's a really good question, Jim. I think, a lot of us are probably used to that within how, kind of how we're operating, but some of us maybe haven't done that before. The one really great thing, we kind of grew our SRE team organically. And so we had folks so Flywheel had a need early on where we had to provide 24/7 support to our customers. So chat support or ticket support, where if, a customer had something break on their site, our frontline support team was already kind of distributed over the entire world. And so our team immediately saw value in that, because they went from, it went from our three co-founders, having to answer phone calls in the middle of the night, to now we have folks in Australia and Europe and other places. And so the minute that you're not being woken up by a phone call, and you can trust that somebody is somewhere else in the world actually handling the issue for you and allowing you to sleep, you actually work through some of those challenges really fast. But I think one of the biggest challenges that we faced is trying to make a small team that's maybe in Australia or Europe feel part of the collective company, or feel part of the collective team. And so we've had to do different things where, we've actually flown the entire company in four times a year to get people actually together and working together. Otherwise, it can just feel like you're just, you're almost like a contractor that's just, not really tied to the company. So you have to be very creative with a team that's outside of the core headquarters to make them feel that they're pulled in. And so there's a lot of different strategies that you can do with that. But from the proving that the SRE mindset works, it's like just people not getting called, proved it out right there. It's just more making those folks feel part of it. Cool. Tim said he wants to tour when we're back open. Oh, Signal ID. Thanks, Tim. Awesome. Yeah, I'm very aware of your account, so thanks for being a customer. Cool. Any other questions? Cool. Aaron dropped in a survey there. So I don't know if I drew a short straw for being late on a Friday. I know it's it's especially hard being virtual, but I appreciate the great turnout and everybody joining here. So I hope you learned something. A score for the Nebraska game tomorrow. It just better be a W, Matt. That's all I care about. Oh, Jim dropped in something. Did you say that you have not implemented air budgets? If so, can you describe why you think that is? I've heard SRE implementations have problems in that area. So air budgets are super hard. And I think that's kind of like the point of the progression and the evolution. If you were to implement an air budget right out of the gate and say, sorry, business, we can't deliver any more features for you, you're probably not going to win a lot of people to support you in your initiative. So I think it's one of those things, as you establish trust and you show the value of why reliability matters, I think people see more of the value in air budgets. We informally have an air budget. It's not explicitly set, but we have, I think this is kind of like the nice thing about being a smaller company is you're very close with each other. So from an engineering, a product, and also just a sales standpoint and a support standpoint, it's generally a very quick conversation. If we know that we've gone past our SLO, the right thing to do is for us to stop delivering on new features for a period of time so we can actually make the right adjustments. Good example of this, a couple of years ago, we had an NFS file system that we just started to have problems at scale. And it was almost one of those explicit things to say, like, there's no point in going forward with these other features because right now the most important feature is getting our NFS system into a reliable state so our customer sites aren't going down. So I think air budgets are absolutely possible and they should be implemented. It just takes an evolution to get there sometimes. Awesome. Well, thank you all for attending. Have a wonderful weekend and stay safe, everybody.